Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I'm going to be going over my League starter for the brand new expansion, patch 3.13 Echoes of the Atlas. So in the new expansion I am planning a boss killer League starter, and the boss killer League starter I'm planning is a Necromancer. Despite what everyone is saying, I believe that Necromancer is probably about the second best option you have for a League starter if you're trying to be competitive with your Atlas progression really early on, the best being a Miner. However, the Miner playstyle isn't quite to my liking. So what kind of Necromancer am I planning on playing? Well, I am planning on playing a Golemancer, more specifically a Carrion Golemancer. So this was my kind of go-to boss killer in Heist, and it is incredibly powerful. Absolutely one of the most powerful summoner builds the game has seen. It has incredible clear for a summoner archetype and very, very strong and resilient boss killing potential. It can do every boss in the game very, very easily on a very, very low budget, with the exception of Adziri and Uber Adziri, purely because of the reflect mechanic, but you can build around that if you really want to with Sibyl's Lament and the Ugal Ascendancy, which you can get from doing maps. So yeah, definitely very, very powerful League starter. However, most people are a little bit concerned as Carrion Golems may have been dethroned from their S tier League starter and boss killing status due to a myriad of nerfs that have been placed on them. Well, before we get into the build, let's go over the nerfs in the patch notes and see what we're dealing with here. So, a Carrion Golem build on a Necromancer is traditionally a physical based build. You use brutality to scale up physical damage considerably with stuff like Impale, minion damage, melee physical, all that kind of stuff. Now, one of the more powerful nodes that you have access to as a physical based character using Carrion Golems is the Rotten Claws node here. So minions have a 20% chance to impale on hit with attacks. Now traditionally a lot of builds take this, specifically elementalist builds as well. They really like to invest into impale. However, I was kind of blindly following these people. I haven't really min-maxed Carrion Golems before until this new patch came out. And people were taking it. Now, what I found when I actually plugged this into PoE with a good setup on a Necromancer is that you actually reach 100% or close to 100% impale chance just with a Dread Banner with a Generosity applied. Now, all you need for this is the nerfed cluster jewels. You can see here it says 6% on this PoB, but I actually have minus 48% aura effect on my helmet. So all you need is 4 6 passive clusters of aura with the nerfs, which you can easily obtain day 1. They don't need to be of a high item level or anything like that. You can get them from Blood Aqueducts, and you can actually cap your Impale with a level 20 Dread Banner with Generosity on it. So that basically means that this nerf to Impale, the Rotten Claws node, doesn't affect a Necromancer based Carrion Golem build at all. So this is not a problem at all. Next up, they nerfed another good notable minion node on the tree for Necromancers. So they have nerfed Renewal. So Renewal currently gives 10% chance for minions to deal double damage while they're on full life. Now Carrion Golems, they're quite beefy, they have a lot of health, and you have a lot of percent life regen as a Necromancer and as a summoner. So a lot of the time your minions are at full health, especially in fights where there's not a lot of auto attack damage. So in fights like Shaper, where he's doing the beam, for example, beam attack, they'll be at full health when they're DPSing him there because they're not really taking damage. So this is a very, very powerful node, and they did half the amount of damage you get from it. However, it's still the most competitive node, in my opinion, on the minion clusters, which you probably want to be taking. The only change here is that on the high end, you might want to take voices instead, but on the low end, you're still going to take renewal. You can see here I've simulated the nerf by not taking one of my renewals on this really early game tree here, my League starter tree. So that is simulated, and while it is a bit of a nerf, it's not a massive nerf at all. It's just a 10% double damage nerf, so it's about 10%, maybe not even 10%, probably about 7 or 8% less damage. While the minions are at full health, which is not too bad at all. Definitely not a disaster or anything like that. Moving on. Alright, 20% minion damage was taken off of Necromancer, so that's very negligible. It's absolutely not a problem. It's going to probably be about 2 or 3% less damage overall. Nothing to worry about. Now, the big heavy hitter here is we lost about 48% aura effectiveness as a Necromancer Carrion Golem player. On the League Starter tree, we'll just go back to it where everything is really cheap. You can see here that we take a ton of these aura of effect nodes, and this is really where you're going to feel the brunt of it because we have taken away that 48% aura effect. You definitely do lose a considerable amount of damage. How much damage? I'll show you guys here by putting it back on. Let's just find my helmet and we'll delete the line. So if we got rid of this, how much damage would we gain? We would gain about 30% of our damage, more damage. So we did lose like 30% damage with this aura cluster nerf. Definitely a massive hit there. However, you can still see here that we have a considerable amount of damage here. This is with 4 golems. It's close to 10 million DPS on absolute day one, scraping the bottom of the barrel kind of gear here. So definitely not a problem there. It is a hit. It's a 30% hit, in fact, but it isn't too bad. And you can mitigate this somewhat when you upgrade your 2 passive up to 2 passive notables. So you get not only replenishing presence, but you also get another aura notable. Those are not as nerfed as the other small nodes, so you can get a little bit of that aura effect back and get back to some pretty high values, which is pretty nice indeed. So overall, about a 30% or 25% with good gear nerf on the damage of Carrion Golems just from that. So we're about we're a decent bit nerfed here, but the big nerf that everyone was expecting was to the gem here, and we got a 20% Carrion Golem damage nerf. Now, I expected this to be significantly higher, and I was telling everyone in my chat and, in Discord that I was prepared to play Carrion Golems even if they nerfed the gem by 60%. And this is actually what I did. I did a bit of a simulation. I basically took some, some trash gear on standard. You can see here, I'm like showing it. I'm on a 5-link tabula with some very questionable gear and all that kind of stuff like that. I'm missing auras. I'm not using my skitterbots, for example. It's a really scuffed setup. And the gem I've dropped here is actually brutality. So that is a 60% damage simulation nerf. And, tons of stuff is really not optimized. And I actually managed to kill Shaper in 3 portals with this super scuffed setup. So if you want to see the kill, maybe I'll link it in the description. I do have it on YouTube. It's unlisted, but I take it down and this is no problem. So this is with all the other nerfs and it's a 60% Carrion Golem gem nerf. And we do Shaper on day 1 with trash gear. So with only a 20% nerf, this build is still absolutely a tier 0 build. A tier 0 League Starter. It has an extremely smooth power curve all the way through the acts and through the atlases 1 to 16 because you can continually upgrade your gear with just rares and you're gaining gem levels. So it's absolutely a very, very powerful League Starter indeed and will scale well into the end game. I'm assuming still achieving close to 50 to 60 million DPS with very, very good gear. So you can really push this to, those ridiculous levels where you're one-shotting Shapers and Cyrus all over again. Absolutely insane. On the defensive side thing, we definitely do, start off a little bit squishy because, we have to prioritize the damage first on our golems. We'll go through the PoB now. But yeah, definitely a super duper powerful build. Let's go through the PoB and I'll kind of take you guys through my thinking on a few of these things on this League Starter. So this build that you're looking at here in the background is designed for day 1. It's meant to be items that you can actually get access to on day 1 and that you could realistically afford if you're actually, a reasonable kind of experience level. If you're doing Chaos Recipe, if you're like buying div cards where they make sense, for example, to get the Alpha's How, you don't buy it outright, you buy the div cards instead since it's cheaper, etc, etc, etc. So this is kind of a day 1 build and it's intended to farm Shaper on day 1 or other similar content like Red Elder. Now, you'll notice here, the first thing I want to point out is that we only have 3.2k life. Now, the reason for this is because it's extremely difficult to pick up life nodes in the Witch area. We have most of them, and we're still only at 3.2k life. It's very difficult to get tanky on a Witch early without going Energy Shield, and that is what this build eventually becomes. I'll do a full build guide on Carrion Golems coming up. This is kind of just my League Starter video where I give you guys my thoughts. But yeah, you transition fairly early to a low life kind of aura based build where you have about 5k energy shield on mid gear and about up to 8 to 10k energy shield on really good gear. So that's kind of where you're going, and as a result of that, you will start on low life when you're on, for example, a Tabula, which this build is currently running on. So yeah, as you can see in that video there before though, I had about 2.8k life and I did Shaper without any issues with significantly less damage. So I wouldn't be too concerned about any of that. Now, with the life out of the way, let's cover the damage here. So on this build, on this League starter, you will have 4 golems with the 2 clay shapers here. Now, that means that we can multiply this damage by 4, and it gives you about 10 million DPS on day 1 in League starter gear. So let's go over the uniques and what you can expect to have to buy for this 10 million DPS. Because that's a considerable amount of damage, isn't it? So for the uniques, we've got 2 clay shapers here. They generally run about 1 or 2C on day 1 after the uniques start entering the system. It's a very, very common unique. It can be obtained by another ways. You can get it just from a unique job, or you can get it from a very common prophecy, which you can just turn in and kill a boss in Act 2, which is pretty easy, not too bad there. Next up, one of our most expensive items is going to be an Alpha's Howl on day 1. These generally run about 40 to 50C on day 1, but with the nerf to Aura Stackers and Auramancers, I do think that these may be a little bit cheaper as people have been disincentivized from going from those Aura strategies. So yeah, this is definitely going to give you a ton of damage because it allows you to run more auras and fit more kind of utility in as well. So Alpha's Howl, definitely very good. You can also pick up a divination card that drops an ashen wood to get this unique on day 1 as well. Very, very nice. Next up, we're using the classic Tabula Rasa. This is going to be available very easily on day 1. You can farm it for it in Black Aqueducts. You can buy the humility cards of other players. You can do corrupted vile side areas. There's so many ways to get this item. Most people, if you're worth your salt, generally have a Tabula Rasa on day 1 or a corrupted 6 link with your colors. Either one of those is very easy to get. I wouldn't be too worried about this. It's not a very high requirement at all. And if you're looking to farm Shaper on day 1, you absolutely will have access to a Tabula Rasa because you're probably a pretty good player. Next up, we got some, generic life resist gloves. Nothing too crazy here. Here's some generic, movement speed, life, resist boots here. We got an amber amulet with life and resist. And we got some rings here. They don't need to be unset. Have one of them be an unset just for gem sockets. Maybe you can also fit in another aura if you wanted, if you have 2 unsets. But the trick here is that they have high dex and strength on them. Now you might be thinking those are some pretty insane rolls. Well, you would be right. However, you can guarantee one of the rolls with an essence. Getting a high tier essence for either strength or dexterity and just rolling it until you get the other one is not too bad. You can also craft it on some of your other gear or on the rings themselves. You can see here I have crafted life, but if you need more resists like I do here, you can also craft resists on them and sacrifice a bit of life. But these rings, I think, are fairly obtainable and fairly fair. Most people are going to have rings in their dump tabs, selling for a few chaos, so I definitely wouldn't be too concerned about obtaining rings like this. Definitely very easy. Next up, we have the most common item from any Abyssal Lich, which you will be starting to encounter in T1 maps. Very, very easy with the ascendancy nodes on the tree as well, on the atlas, sorry. It's going to be pretty easy to get an item like this on day 1 because people will be specking into Abyss to get those early uniques and those early Abyss jewels and Stygians. So a very easy item to get. It's generally about 1 or 2C and yeah, not too bad. Next up, we have 2 mod Abyss jewels. You can see here I have life and minion damage. You can swap it and change it if you want to get a bit more damage. You can get a 2 mod damage one and then maybe a life one, just pure life. These are not hard to obtain. You can roll the life or the minions, with alterations. Worst case scenario, you drop the life and just get the minion damage. Just roll it with alterations. It's going to take you about 10 alterations to get it. Ghastly Eye Jewels are available early. This is a low item level mod, so you can get this in Blood Aqueducts again. Definitely not a problem, and this is kind of SSF's territory. You could get these gems pretty easily. Definitely not too bad, especially if you're using trade and you're picking them up off the trade website. These are probably going to be about maximum 5C each, or maybe even 1C if you get a good deal. Next up, flasks or whatever you want. You could use multiple Quicksilvers, you can use Chaos Resist, whatever you want here, it doesn't really matter. All defensive flasks is generally the go though. If you can afford a Taste of Hate, that's even better, but whatever. You don't need a Taste of Hate, it's just a bit more mitigation. Flasks really aren't relevant for a summoner at all. Next up, we got more Ghastly Eye Jewels, they're all the same. These cheap jewels, drop the life if you can't afford it kind of thing. Let's get into the clusters. So you can see here that I've got a cluster jewel here. It's a large minion cluster jewel. You want an 8 passive one. These again, you can drop them in Blood Aqueducts, just off any Delirium mirror. They're going to be very, very common and very easy to obtain. They're probably going to cost you about an Alk or a Chaos. Maybe there'll be a little bit more if this build is popular. But what you really want to be looking for on here is actually the +4 to all attributes. This is the most important stat here. You can drop Renewal, it's only a little bit more damage. But you know, if you can get it, that's really good. Anything attribute and any notable is probably really worth your time. You could take Vicious Bite, you could take, you know, the Claws node, if you wanted to do that for a little bit of extra early Impale before you get a level 20 Dread banner. Definitely very, very powerful, and you know, they're very, very easy to get. I would suggest rolling with alterations to try and get the all attributes if possible. You know, you can even just +2 all attributes is fine. Next up, we got the medium cluster jewels. Again, you should be able to get these just, you know, whenever. Any delirium will drop these and they'll be rollable. You know, again, you want the attributes. That's the primary thing, but replenishing presence here is actually extremely powerful. It's going to keep your minions alive more. So a replenishing presence is probably the priority here. If you need the attributes, you can drop replenishing presence and get some attribute clusters as well. But you know, there are other solutions to attributes, as I was mentioning earlier. You can craft it on gear, you can get it even more on rings. You know, there is definitely some things that you can get going there. Not too bad there. More Abyss Jewels. Now, the most expensive item that I have in my day one build is 1 Primordial Might. Everything else is pretty much, we've already seen it, or it's completely dirt cheap or self-craftable. Primordial Might is the one card that you're not going to be able to get, one item you're not going to be able to get very easily. It's probably going to be about 2 Exalts, which is probably about 80 Chaos. Now, how am I going to get this? Well, it's simple. I'm going to be selling pretty much everything I get to get this, but I'm also going to be doing Chaos Recipe on lockdown. I'm going to be handing in as many of those as possible so that I can get the money to get a Primordial Might Jewel. Now, what if you don't have a Primordial Might Jewel? What do you do until then? Well, you would replace one of your links with a Feeding Frenzy support. So you would drop Brutality and you would go for Feeding Frenzy. You know, it's not ideal, but you can see that we don't lose too much damage. We still have over 5 million DPS here, or well, close to 5 million DPS. I'm not going to do the exact math, but yeah, so I think it's actually 5.2 million DPS here. So pretty good. You know, it's not a big deal. You do lose a lot of damage, but you can basically cut the Primordial Might if you use Feeding Frenzy on your Carrion golems here. So that is a significant money saver, but of course you can get significantly more damage by getting that Primordial Might in there, which is absolutely what you want to do. So pretty cool in my opinion. Of course, I am running level 20 gems. Now, if you're worried about your gems, you know, you could do more maps. It's all about doing more maps. But if you really need gem levels, you can also buy some, you know, Zoth Breachstones or some Tool Breachstones or something like that. Generally, they have a positive return on the profit they give, and they give an incredible amount of gem XP and XP in general. So those can be a good way to level up your gems early. You know, I mean, I've got 20 quality here. You can get rid of that. We still do Mega Dam. It's not a big deal. So now, why would you consider going Carrion Golems? Well, the playstyle for this is going to be about a medium kind of effectiveness mapper. Obviously, this is a more kind of geared up character, but we can show a map real quick. And I can show you guys what it kind of looks like when it's got like a bit more damage. This would definitely not be the day one build, but you know, it is what it is. I gotta show you guys something, don't I? So let's take off some auras here to resummon a golem, because we're missing one. We're actually missing 2 here. You know, we'll just use 4 because that's how many we would have, and we'll not use any zombies to simulate a massive damage nerf. How's that? That seems fairly fair. We'll just roll up this T16, and you know, we'll get into it. You know, bing bang boom, we'll put it in, and we'll kind of see what a map looks like. So we'll jump in. This is going to be kind of like the clear speed. You of course would have a bit more clear speed probably with the zombies. Looks like we've got a few visual bugs here. But in general, it's nothing insane. You're not going to be as fast as BV, for example, but you're definitely going to move at a reasonable pace, and you're going to do very well on bosses. So if you come up to the boss, you know, you can kind of just like expect to just, you know, AFK it. It's not going to be a big problem. You know, everything just dies, no problem. So down they go. Not a very good loot filter on, do I? So yeah, the clear is fine. The damage is excellent if you give them a time to ramp up and you have everything up. Absolutely a very, very good build to choose as a league starter. Now, let's say that your goal here is to make quite a bit of currency. What can you do with this league starter right now with this gear? Well, this league starter should be possible to do Shaper. It should be possible to do Elder. It should also be possible to do all of the Breachstones all the way up to, like, you know, pure Chayula. You know, you will have to be pretty careful on pure Chayula due to the fact that we have low chaos resist and life, but it is possible as long as you position correctly, you have the damage for it. If you're really familiar with the Uber Elder fight and, you know, you're very good at dodging Uber Elder and all of the mechanics, this build can also do Uber Elder on this budget, which is completely insane. So on day one with this gear, you know, with a Primordial Might, you have the potential to do every boss in the game. Straight up. This is going to destroy Mavens. It's going to be able to full clear any Maven you have. In terms of leveling it, I would recommend TIE Killers, Spectre, Necromancer leveling, although I'd spec a little bit more into Carrion Golems than he does, and I definitely invest in the Golem nerds up the top here. So that's going to be my league starter, guys. I will be bossing at the start. You guys can tune into the stream and definitely pay attention to my channel when I post the Carrion Golem build guide. I'm going to take you from day dot all the way up to maximum gear with harvest, and you guys are going to see that build progression and see the numbers go wild, even with the nerfs. So hope you guys have enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Carrion Golems are definitely not dead. Until then, cheers.